Well, good morning. It's a distinct pleasure to welcome you to the Maxine Goodman Levin College of Urban Affairs at Cleveland State. My name is Roland Anglin. I'm the dean of the college, and thank you, that helps me. It's so good to see so many gathered who have a passion for building better neighborhoods and enhancing the quality of life for all our citizens. So why are we here? Well, the Cuyahoga Land Bank and its work has been an integral component of this region's community development efforts over the past 10 years. And we know that it's a signature effort in dealing with the foreclosure crisis. Today, we are here to learn about the economic impact of the organization's efforts over the past 10 years. It was 10 years ago, for those of you who don't know, in this very building that then Governor Ted Strickland ceremonially signed Senate Bill 353, the so-called Land Bank bill, into law. So it's very fitting that we come back to this venue and hear the results of this unique experiment that was launched 10 years ago. Before we introduce the consultant that performed the study, the president of the Cuyahoga Land Bank, Gus Francos, would like to make some introductions. So, Gus?
Thank you, Dr. Anglin, and welcome everybody. This is a great crowd. Thank you for coming here today. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. One, I'd like to just remind everybody, in case you haven't gotten an invitation, on October 17th, we're having our 10-year celebration gala. It's going to be a really great party, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. And our consultant helping us with that would really get on my case if I didn't remind everybody. So I'm reminding everybody. There's a hold the date card on the table over there. Let me begin by just saying, again, thank you to all of you. I'd like to thank Dr. Anglin and CSU for hosting this event for us because, as he said, this was a special thing to be here 10 years ago, standing on this very podium and having the Land Bank bill signed into law, and 10 years later seeing the things that it has accomplished with all of your help. There's some very special people that I'd like to recognize. I'd like to recognize my friend, former colleague, and partner in this endeavor, Jim Rokakis. Jim, would you stand real briefly? Jim Rokakis, early on in 2008, was the brainchild of all of this. He saw all the chaos happening, and he said, we need to tackle this. We need to figure out a way to do something. And so we started this partnership, and he hired me as a scribe, and we ended up passing some amazing law in the General Assembly. Robert Rink, who is another staff attorney of ours who couldn't be here, I just want to shout out to him because he's not often recognized, but in those early days, he was the co-collaborator in helping me to write a lot of this legislation. I would like to also recognize our board chairman, Anthony Brancatelli, who we're going to hear from a little bit later. And the rest of our board, some of them couldn't be here, but some of them are. I believe Ken Surratt, where are you? Ken has been a steadfast supporter on our board, and we're very happy for him because he's going to the Federal Reserve. Sad for us because we're gonna lose him from our board. I think Pernell Jones is another board member, alternate. Pernell, are you here? Oh, there you are in the back. Thank you, Pernell. I'd like to also thank our our county council, and our county administration for being so supportive. Ted Carter is here on behalf of Armand Budish. Ted, he's up front here. And where's Khalil? Khalil is here on behalf of Council President Dan Brady. Khalil, are you around here somewhere? I thought I saw you. Well, in any event, he's here. And as far as the nitty-gritty of our work, the partnerships that we have on the ground actually make things happen. That is our CDCs, and I can't name all of them, and our nonprofits. So many of them have helped produce all these outputs that you're seeing on the screen. I would be very, very remiss if I didn't mention our General Assembly legislative champions. Senate Bill 353 was sponsored by and pushed through and advocated for by then Senator Patton, now Representative Tom Patton. And when that bill passed, we had to have it quickly carried by somebody in the House at that time, and that was Matt Dolan. So they're Northeast Ohio, part of our Northeast Ohio delegation in the General Assembly, and they've been absolute stars for us. So we appreciate them. As far as some of our elected representatives, all of them whose help and support is essential for us. There's no particular order. Ken Williamson is here for U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. Ken. We have some mayors here. Eddie Kraus, I see Ed. Hello, Ed. And we have Kristen Holzheimer Gale, the mayor of Euclid. Solon for Eddie Kraus, Euclid for Mayor Gale. Mayor Blackwell. Hello, Mayor Blackwell. Thank you for coming here. And I think we have Karen Kandinsky from U.S. Senator Portman's office. There you are. Thank you. Thank you for coming so very much. I mentioned the board members. And then lastly, I'd just like to make a big shout out to my staff, because this has been a journey like none other. This has been an outstanding privilege for me personally, as well as for the group that we've worked with. We have very little turnover at the land bank, and everybody has taken their work not only as a job but as a mission. They've taken ownership of it, and I just could not be more thankful and more blessed at the staff that we have. They're not all here, but I'm not going to name them all, but if you could just please stand up. Jackie, Kim, Patricia, Doug, Andrea, Jesse, Summer, Michelle, Jackie. They really make it happen and make my job a lot easier. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and let me turn it back over to Dr. Anglin.
Thank you, Gus. Well, I know we are all eager to hear the results of the economic impact study, and I know I am. But first, let's begin with some context about the depth and breadth of the Cuyahoga Land Bank's work. And to help us gain perspective, we have some distinguished panelists. And they're from diverse sectors, but all who have worked closely with the Cuyahoga Land Bank. We have with us today Councilman Anthony Brancatelli, who is the Cuyahoga Land Bank's current board chair. He's also a councilman for Cleveland's Ward 12, and he has a long history of community development work in Cleveland. Councilman? We also have Ms. Susan Fuhrer, who was the director of Northeast Ohio's VA healthcare system. And with the Cuyahoga Land Bank's help, our VA hospital recently celebrated the groundbreaking of the Greater Cleveland Fisher House development, which she will talk a little bit about. Well, I also know she is off to Metro Health as the president of the Social Determinants of Health and Health Equity. I'd like to hear more about that another time. Sounds very interesting. Next, we have Richard Leon, who runs Metro West Community Development Organization, which is a housing organization on the near west side of Cleveland. Mr. Leon and his organization are transforming the neighborhood surrounding Metro Health Center in partnership with the Cuyahoga Land Bank and other partners, and he will explain that to us. Next, we have the Honorable Mayor David Smith, who is the mayor of North Randall Village and has worked passionately to bring development to the former shuttered North Randall Mall. And that's been developed into the Amazon Fulfillment Center, bringing over 2,500 new jobs. He will tell us what the Cuyahoga Land Bank's role was in that development. And finally, we have our Kamala Lewis, who is director of the neighborhood revitalization for the city of Shaker Heights. She will tell us how the Cuyahoga Land Bank has worked with Shaker Heights and other inner ring suburbs. So let's begin with Councilman Brackatelli. Help set the table here, sir. You have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly over the years, and I have two questions. First, what was the setting in 2008, just before the Cuyahoga Land Bank opened its doors? And second, what is the biggest impact that the Cuyahoga Land Bank has had on your community?
I hope these mics are live. Oh, great. I should have been whispering to you earlier. Like you should have thanked your wife Christine for being here. Christine, thank you for lending us your husband for so many years. What a great day, and thank you all for coming out. I really want to thank both Gus and Jim. Congratulations, your grandparents to a 10-year-old. And you got past the terrible twos and you made it all the way to 10 years old, and the results are just tremendous. And it's not just as the president, but it's also the legal counsel for the land bank. And what makes Gus so special is that he has helped shape not just this land bank, but the land banks all over the state of Ohio, and working with Jim to come up with changes down at the State House, changes that make this one of the most robust land banks in all the country. And I had the pleasure of going down and meeting with Congressman Dan Kildee when they had the Genesee County Land Bank, and it was just amazing to see what they were doing, and I realized now what they were doing with just a small portion of what the great work is being done here. So thank you for the question, Doctor, and thank you for hosting here at Cleveland State. I am a graduate of Cleveland State, was an honor student. Yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor. You've heard it all. But I really want to go back at the beginning. I know I only have 30 minutes. Going on at 2008 and setting the stage, it's great to see Barbara Anderson here and great to see Frank Ford and others. I first got elected in office in 2005 and got summoned to a meeting with Barbara Anderson and neighbors. And it wasn't a meeting of what are you going to do? It was the greatest meeting I ever had is what are we going to do? And at that time, we worked together to put together a white paper that we took actually to the FBI and federal agents to say there's a lot of fraud going on here and this is really suspicious activity. The foreclosure crisis hit our neighborhood early. In 2007, the neighborhood I represent had the highest foreclosure rate in all the United States. It was god-awful. When you look at how unsettling it was at that moment in time, we were losing 2 houses a day to foreclosure. And that was so destructive to our community, so destructive to the social fabric of our community. At that time, the Community Development Corporation, I know Marie Kittredge was the director, they had 30-some block clubs, they were strong and vibrant, but we started seeing the exodus of all these houses that are being abandoned, all these houses that are churning, and the loss of value. The seniors that became prisoners in their home because their only equity was the home that they owned was now a negative value. The average sale price in North Broadway was $6,000 at the time, and it was a horrible circumstance where folks were just prisoners in their home and we could not even put a roof on your house because you couldn't get an equity line to do it. So starting that early meant that we got a leg up and being in front of the foreclosure crisis, and through a very valiant team of folks and leaders in the nonprofit world, you saw what folks like Zach Germaniak and others in the housing world can do as they were collecting that data and saying, let's put together research and let's figure out how we can attack this. And that really set the table of having a sane plan and how do we approach this. And along comes the land bank is the most impactful entity that helped change that plan. It wasn't just us chasing the city of Cleveland for demolition. It was being incredibly strategic and going after properties, using the power of the BOR sales, using the power of being able to force transactions that you're now starting to see the needle move significantly in neighborhoods like ours. So the impact can't be just pointed to one house, to one block, but throughout the neighborhood. The stabilization that you start seeing in a neighborhood that had the highest foreclosure rate in the entire United States is tremendous. We still have a lot of problems that we have to work on. We still know demolition is an important part of it, but you're now starting to see through partnerships like we had with Safeguard Properties and Forest City through the Slavic Village Recover program, now Slavic Village Rediscovered, I gotta get my SVRs correct, that we can make a difference and we can have a partnership with a great partner like the County Land Bank where you can be strategic. We have a great partner in the Cleveland Housing Network. We would not have been able to do the tax credit partnership that we just built 40 new homes on without the County Land Bank being able to be strategic, because we know that LIHTC now says we are looking at the holistic picture of putting these homes out on the market. What's going on with the property next door? What's going on with the property across the street? And if we did not have the strategic plan to be able to tear down the nuisance properties, to be able to assemble the land to build new properties, we would not have the progress that we're making today. So, Doctor, thank you. I think that impact has been tremendous.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Let's move to Mayor Smith. He's worked tirelessly to bring development to North Randall. I understand this project involved a very long and complicated land assembly effort. Tell us a bit about the mall and when it closed and how the Cuyahoga Land Bank helped your client to assemble the land for this abandoned mall.
Well, we only have 3 minutes. I can go back to 1999 when we acquired the hotel that sat on the corner. The hotel caused us to go into fiscal emergency. At that point in time, we were donated the J.C. Penney's building to the village. We took that, we marketed that building, we sold it to the Power Sport Institute. And my wife and I had just got back from a cruise. 2003 was my official first day on the job. How many of you remember 2003 when the lights went out across the United States of America? That was my first day on the job. And believe it, it was all downhill from there. We had to have, our policemen were on furlough. We had to have the sheriff's department give us coverage from second shift to third shift. We saw so many doors shut, but we continued to nickname the community as the sleeping giant. We were counted out. We had no help from anyone. I'm getting to the land bank. We were just advised to give up. It'll never happen. So we kept on, looking for opportunities to develop the community. And I developed a relationship with Stuart Lichter, who's the president of IRG. He came to town. He was looking to buy the Thistledown racetrack. I tried to convince him to buy the hotel, almost did, but it didn't happen. So we continued to move forward, and all of a sudden, 2009, the mall closed. It was a happy moment for me. The mall closed, and I said to myself, this is the opportunity for us to redevelop this community, thinking not about retail in the sense of retail, but we had to rezone the property. So we rezoned it as light industrial. We sold the J.C. Penney's building, as I said, to Power Sport Institute. And I think after that, 2013, I get a call from Gus Frangos. This is when it really all restarted. Gus asked if we would be interested in the Dillard's building. And all of you know the Randall Park Mall at that time was dilapidated. It was nothing there. So when I talked to Gus, I said, Gus, he says, we can do a pass-through agreement. So I talked to my law director. He says, have you lost your mind? We're already in fiscal emergency. We have the hotel. Nobody wants it. We can't sell the note. We're in fiscal emergency. He says, what are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know. So we acquired the Dillard's building. Don't try this at home. We acquired the Dillard's building for $2,500 from the land bank, property and all. So we tried to market it. So I had 2 developers that were in town, and I pitted one against the other to try and buy this facility, not knowing what they would do with it. And it ended up that IRG ended up buying the Dillard's building from us. So at that point in time, we were further engaged with the land bank, myself and IRG, to try to see what else we could get that was that affordable. And so as a result, we continued to get the pieces to the puzzle together. IRG acquired Dillard's from us for $65,000. We continued the same strategy. We helped IRG to commandeer as many properties as they could. And long story short, I had a call from Chris Emergent. We met. He says, I got an opportunity for you that's going to be bigger than Jay-Z and Beyonce. I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, I can't tell you what's going to happen, but when it happens, you're going to be the talk of the town. I didn't know what was going on. I had a meeting. It was on a rainy day up at Corporate College with about 50 to 75 people to meet me. I had no idea who it was. Am I over my 3 minutes? Can I keep going? I had no idea who it was, but I had to sign a confidentiality clause. I went to the school board. I was able to get a 75% tax abatement without them knowing who it was that was going to bring this development to the village. And long story short, the code name for this development was Goliath. I had nicknamed us the Sleeping Giant. So I said, okay, this is nothing but good faith. So as the story goes, we ended up with one of the biggest facilities in Cuyahoga County. I think the one in South Euclid is going to be the same size, but in terms of employment, we have brought 2,500 employees, God bless you, Mayor. Euclid, I'm sorry. We've gotten 2,500 employees, and it would not have happened if it had not been for Gus Frangos and the Land Bank. And I could go on forever. And as a result of that, we were able to increase our workforce, buy new equipment. The list goes on and on and on. I am so proud to be the mayor of the village of North Randall now. There was a time that I would hide from the news media, but now it's a proud moment for us, and we shine because the Land Bank shines. So thank you, Gus Frangos. Thank you, Land Bank.
Thank you, Mayor.
That's a tremendous story. Let's move to Ricardo Leon. I understand that the grounding work of the Cuyahoga Land Bank in its housing stabilization work with local community development organizations. Tell us a little bit about Metro West, what it does, and how your organization partners with the Land Bank.
Yes. So Metro West, for those of you that are unfamiliar, is the community development organization that serves 3 neighborhoods: Stockyards, Clark Fulton, and Brooklyn Center. And those neighborhoods are south of I-90, north of the Brookside Valley, between West 25th and West 90th. So really kind of the last working class enclave on the near west side of Cleveland. The neighborhood is also incredibly diverse. It's about 60% people of color, particularly Latinos, about 45% Latino, and it is really the densest Latino neighborhood in the state of Ohio. What's important about the neighborhood and our relationship with the Land Bank, like many other neighborhoods across the country, particularly neighborhoods of color, right, vulnerable neighborhoods, we were ravaged by the housing crisis. In 2008 or 2006. Median sales price in the neighborhood for a house, just your average turnkey home, was around $65,000. Then the recession hit. By 2011, that number had dropped to $20,000 in our neighborhood, and we had a 17% vacancy rate. So we had about 1,600 vacant houses just sitting out in the neighborhood. Since then, with our partnership with the Land Bank, we were able to do a significant amount of targeted demolition. So we were able to really go out and get the worst houses in the neighborhood knocked down. And then we also created a program that we call a third-party rehab program that we were able to work with the Land Bank on kind of creating this. And I know other CDCs now use the same program as well, where we would identify the houses that were vacant that could be saved, and then we would identify third-party developers that would willingly take those houses on, rehab them, bring them back online, and then either live in them, rent them, or sell them. So since 2011, we've done over 180 of those rehabs, and about 50% of them have gone to owner occupants. Wow. So and the interesting thing is that of those owner occupants, about 95% are people of color as well. So we are creating home ownership in our neighborhoods, in distressed neighborhoods. And so what we've seen since, as of 2019, we are down to a 9% vacancy rate, which is still a little bit higher than the city. City's about 7.5%. However, it was the second year in a row where we were at 9%. So we're seeing that the market is stabilizing. And from that $20,000 that we were at in median sales price, as of 2019, we're up to $36,000. So it's about a 60% increase. Still relatively low. We understand that $36,000 for a turnkey home is still essentially a broken market, right? But the reality is that we have seen a massive increase in opportunity in the neighborhood, in that of those 800 or so houses that got demolished, that is now vacant land that is developable. And for the first time, and I'm a lifelong resident of the neighborhood, for the first time in my life, there's a massive amount of investment coming into the community, particularly the vast majority of it in low to moderate income housing. So creating housing for our community, a community where the median household income is $21,000, half of the county's median household income. So we are providing now, we have this opportunity because of the efforts of the Land Bank and our partnership with them to actually create long-term affordable housing in a community that desperately needs it. but then to also encourage mixed income development, because for the first time ever, we're actually seeing market rate development coming into our neighborhood as well. So we are, thanks to our partnership with the Land Bank and all of their help and assistance along the way this past decade, we are now for the first time ever in a situation where the neighborhood is seeing a massive amount of investment, both for low to moderate income people as well as market rate investment. And we actually have this opportunity to create a truly diverse mixed income neighborhood, which, again, I think ultimately long term will have will offer the highest quality of life for our residents, which is really the most important thing for us as the CDC. And none of that work would have been able to happen without the Land Bank, quite frankly.
Another fabulous story. It's important to make the point that the Land Bank doesn't just work in Cleveland. It works in a number of inner-ring suburbs. And we have here today with us Ms. Kamala Harris, who represents an inner-ring suburb.
Roland, I wish it was Kamala Harris, but...
No, that's an inside joke. Kamala and I are good friends. Ms. Kamala Lewis, who represents an inner-ring suburb, nearly Shaker Heights. Ms. Lewis, you were there in the beginning when the Cuyahoga Land Bank started, and you worked with the organization in many ways. Can you talk about Shaker Heights and the Cuyahoga Land Bank, how they work together on strategic projects in Shaker Heights? And I understand that you also serve on the First Suburbs Consortium Housing Committee. Can you give us a brief summary of the Cuyahoga Land Bank's outputs with many of the other inner-ring suburbs, such as Euclid, Maple Heights, and Cleveland Heights?
Thank you very much, Dean Anglin. Yeah, I'm honored to be able to share my passion for the County Land Bank with everybody here today. But as I look out in the audience, I see all the familiar faces. This is family. Everybody here doesn't need this report to tell them about the impact of the County Land Bank, because we live it and breathe it every single day, and particularly in the first suburbs communities, of which Shaker Heights is one. I would be remiss if I didn't add another numbers to all the numbers we've already heard and that we will hear from Nigel, because Gus asked me to. But so the County Land Bank has done over 1,500 demolitions in the first suburb communities and over 650 rehabs. And we will learn from this analysis what that economic impact is. But really what I wanted to give you a sense of is what that social impact is like. And that's a story that you don't hear as often in the headlines. And that's the story of, well, anybody can do demos. We've all done them out there. We know it's not that hard to do a demolition, a little bit harder to do a rehab. Those are bricks and mortar stuff, and they're important, absolutely. But the real issue is the impact that it makes on the residents of these neighborhoods. And so the 1,500 demolitions and the 650 rehabs in the first ring suburbs, that translates into thousands of homeowners, residents who now feel better about their neighborhood, thousands of residents who are no longer calling their mayors, complaining, who are no longer living in fear that night when they go to bed because of the vacant, abandoned house beside them. The other aspect that I wanted to speak briefly about was actually why has this worked? And of course it's worked because of the brilliance of Jim Rackakis and Gus Frangus and their teams. But you can have the most brilliant idea, and it's all really about the execution. And for anybody who hasn't worked with the Land Bank staff, that's the secret sauce. Because what does it take to do these? And it doesn't just take getting a crane out there and bashing down some walls. What it really takes is people who are willing to understand the community that they're working in, who are willing to stand out there and listen to the unhappy neighbor, to make them feel heard. That's what they do, day in, day out. I don't know what the rest of you were doing on Friday, just gone, that Friday, which was the first sunny day we had seen in months in Cleveland. I suspect that you were all part of the crowd down at Edgewater. But I had the pleasure of being out at a moldy, abandoned properties with my counterparts from the County Land Bank. And they were out there to assess properties, which they do day in, day out. But as you guys know, when you go out to these properties, a lot of other people suddenly come out as well. And what really impressed me, and always has, was their willingness to sit and listen and empathize. And that made all the difference to every person that they interacted with that day. And they did this, they don't have to do it like I do just in one community, they have to do it in all the communities of Cuyahoga County, and that takes real special skill. The other thing that isn't often talked about, and Councilman Brancatelli referenced, was all the other behind-the-scenes work that the County Land Bank staff do to help us all make our jobs easier every day. And that's the stuff that folks like Doug Sawyer does, working with Gus Frangos and Jim Rokakis to change laws that help us get into these homes and see what their condition is without having to go and get search warrants. Those are critical tools that people are not going to talk about outside of this room. It's when you can pick up the phone and call Jessica Masters, and she's going to help you figure out where a property stands in the tax foreclosure process. That's critical to every one of us in the community development field. It's when you can call up Kim Steigerwald and know, okay, here's somebody who's going to help me figure out how do I get this property. It may not be as big as Randall Park Mall, but for every one of us, particularly in the first ring suburbs that are small, every little property makes a huge difference. And so, you know, what I wanted to make you leave here with today is understanding the social impact that the Cuyahoga Land Bank has had on all of our communities, but also that secret sauce. So the next sunny day when you are looking for somebody to go out with you, to go look at a vacant and abandoned house, there's just one number you need to know. 216-698-8853, okay?
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, for that great story about partnership, and we also wish you well on your electoral ambitions. Let's move to Susan Fuhrer. Ms. Fuhrer, tell us a little bit about how the Land Bank has helped assemble land for the Greater Cleveland Fisher House. First, tell the audience what the Fisher House is and its importance to the community. And tell us about the research that was necessary to assemble a suitable site for this project, which I understand celebrated a ribbon-cutting ceremony just this month on June 11th.
Thank you. So those that don't know what a Fisher House is, it's like a Ronald McDonald House for veterans. And at the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA, I am proud to say that we are one of the largest VA hospitals in the entire country. And with that, we have more centers of clinical excellence than any other VA. So what does that mean? That means that on any given day, we have between 30 and 40 families that travel to Cleveland so that their loved ones, their veterans, can get care at our medical center, and the family doesn't have somewhere to stay. And so what the Land Bank did is it helped solve a problem that we had. So we actually had the Fisher Foundation. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great foundation. They came in, we gave them their speech. They said, you know, you don't need just one Fisher House. You need 2 Fisher Houses based on the number of veterans families that you see. And for that, if the community can raise $3 million, we as the Fisher Foundation will contribute $9 million to build not 1, but 2 homes. So great, right? I've come up with $3 million and somebody's going to give me 9. Who would say no, right? Nobody. Except that if you've looked at the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA, you can recognize there's not a lot of land around there. University Circle, tough. So I had the best good fortune to meet Gus and his excellent team, and Gus said, you know, if we go a block and a half north up 105th and we, you know, get these 11 parcels put together, and we're going to get some from the city, we're going to get some from the county, we're going to get some from people, you know, we might just be able to do this. And, you know, I have to say I'm used to big bureaucracy, but county and city bureaucracy and the federal bureaucracy, it has been a challenge, and Gus helped navigate us through that. To acquire the properties, to donate land to the federal government. You think it would be easy to donate land, not to the federal government. And then to work with the Fisher House, get the electricity, get the utilities, work with the residents, And the result is, as you said, on June 11th, we opened up 2 Fisher homes. If you have not seen them, you need to go see them. They are absolutely gorgeous. Don't our nation's heroes deserve nothing but? Our first family to stay in the Fisher house was a young couple. He's still active duty. He was blinded in a conflict in Syria in January. They came to us from Fort Bragg. They knew nothing about the city of Cleveland. And because of the Fisher houses, because of the land bank, because of the city, because of the county, support from our senators and our congressionals, we have a state-of-the-art facility where 40 families can come from anywhere in the country, get first-class care from the VA, and move forward. And that I am just so grateful for. So thank you to everyone, thanks to the entire community, on behalf of all of our veterans, the 8,500 that we see every single day.
I want us to keep clapping, but also to give the panel a round of applause. They gave us some important information, some great stories, and they did it within 3 minutes. It's quite a diverse body of work, and I know that you all have questions, but before we get to the questions for the panel, I want to introduce you to Mr. Nigel Griswold of Dynamometrics. He is the researcher with Dynamometrics from the state of Michigan who completed the study, and he's here to tell us what we've all been waiting to hear, which is the results of the Cuyahoga Land Bank's economic impact over the past 10 years. So, Mr. Nigel Griswold, could you take the stage?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm just so thankful right now. This is a really neat thing to be a part of. Thank Jim Rokakis, thank Ed Herman for tracking me down. 6-8 years ago it's been now. Working with Gus, it's such a neat thing to hear the impact of the land bank on the ground and hear the stories of the economic impact being disseminated across the community. So that's like very rewarding as a researcher, because we sit and we gather all the data and transform it into economic impact information, which I don't get to touch the ground and see the impact on the people. And so it's really rewarding to hear that. And so I feel really thankful to be part of this. I'm Nigel, CEO at Dynamometrics, and an economist and a researcher. And we've seen that there's a $1.43 billion impact from all this activity over the last 10 years. And my job is to kind of unpack that in terms of the hard economic reality that has come out of all of this great social impact as well. So I'm going to go through the study a bit and just kind of parse out the way that we came up with those numbers. And I'll just dive into it. A key note that I want to put up, my sense was there was going to be a video before I did this, but am I supposed to just launch into it? All right, Jackie, cool. I'll tell you all that stuff in a minute. Okay. Yeah, and so all of that, I get to kind of unpack methods, and I think then we get to talk about how, if there's deeper questions about different caveats for the study or different components of how we got to those numbers, as well as for the panel to answer questions. Another comment is like the role of the research. The importance and the role of the research over this time frame is what we've learned in the process of my career has kind of been dedicated to identifying pre and post crash the effect of how blighted structures and neighborhood decline impacts those environments. And telling the story of how ameliorating, making the blight go away, how that changes a neighborhood, and measuring that has been a critical component to getting resources. Telling the story of evidence-based stories about change in neighborhoods drives the federal government and state government to move resources. That's what we've seen over this time frame, and it's been really exciting to see that. And seeing it come to fruition has been just such a gift in my career. So I'm very thankful. I'm gonna unpack the 1.43 billion. We're spatial econometricians. We're economists. Our job is to do objective science to quantify the effect of change at the neighborhood scale. Specifically for this study, all the activity of the Cuyahoga County Land Bank since inception. There's some components that we were conservative in our estimates, and I can unpack those things specifically through questions or further discussion. But I'm gonna dive into some of the methodologies on the specific pieces now. So the property value impact, I think, is probably the largest impact. It's more than half of the impact that the land bank has had over the last 10 years. There's the impact of demolition in neighborhoods. There's the impact of rehabilitation in neighborhoods. The way that we did that, I want to shout out for Neo Can Do and Cuyahoga County's data resource. You guys have, yeah. Cuyahoga County has an unsurpassed data resource nationwide. Mike Schramm and the Land Bank and Case Western Reserve University and the ability of the research that can happen at that university because of that, and the ability of the Land Bank and partners to distribute information to the communities across the county. That is a critical resource to be able to do research like this. Effectively, every single property in your county is tracked over time with all kinds of different economic indicators attached to that property in every time period. So what that allows us to do as economists is build very refined models, very refined economic models. And so we can actually, when that demolition occurs, we can actually go to that demolition in the time period it occurred and see how it shocked property values in that microenvironment, right around that demolition. Same thing with rehabilitation, you can see how value changed. And so we have these thousands of demos, we have these thousands of rehabs, we run those models and then we quantify the delta. Before the demo happened, you had blight across the street. After the demo, you have a vacant lot, right? We can quantify the change in value near that activity. Before the rehabilitation, you have a blighted structure. After the rehabilitation, you have an occupied home, and it's folks who are paying taxes. So whether it's rental, almost always paying taxes, whether it's owners or renters. So that's the post facto of a rehab, from a vacant to occupied and tax paying. And so that's where those numbers come from. So that demolition, between demo and rehab, it's like $736 million of neighboring property value impacted over the 10-year time period. So from demolition, it's $415 million. There's 8,000 demolitions. Each one of those demolitions impacted the property value near that home. And that's how you get that $415 million. And I can unpack deeper in the methods that we quantified how we built the model that allowed us to do that. The same model, it's a real estate housing model. That same model allows us to understand the pre and post of a rehab. And that's $320 million of property value impact. That's saying all the homes near That the house that was broken down is now fixed up and people in it. All those homes, it's 500 feet is the variable. All those homes in the micro environment around that home just increased in value. And in the aggregate over 10 years, you have 320 million in property value affected by all those over 2,000 rehabilitations in your communities. So together, that's 736 million. That's half the total impact. So we chunked that. That's a critical piece of the total economic impact. The next piece is there was almost 180 million of expenditures of the land bank doing their activities. And so those dollars are paying the demolition crews, paying the construction folks that are rehabbing the homes, mowing, maintenance, all the activities on the individual properties, the land bank staff themselves, all of those jobs and activities that get created out of $180 million getting distributed into your community. The existence of the land bank created those jobs because they garnered those resources. That existence of the land bank moved those dollars through the economy. And so it's around 1.7 is the multiplier. So each one of those dollars that got spent created across all the different industries that use those dollars, about $1.70 got created in your economy. So the total economic impact from that 178 million is what it is about 305 million of economic impact from that spend. So those dollars move through your economy. There's another 305 million. That also creates a number of jobs. So we quantified that as well. That's over 2,000 jobs that got created from that spend. So that was 2,114 jobs in that same, just from the expenditures of the land bank into the community. There's one of the specific programs, so that's a line item. The next one is, I'll hit because it's an economic impact directly as well, is the deed and escrow program that the land bank did. Effectively, I think I can explain the program. Effectively, the land bank identifies properties that can be rehabilitated that in like quasi-healthy market zones, like enough where somebody might actually rehabilitate the home and either live in it or sell it and make it a rental or sell it to another owner, something like that. And so the land bank, if you can bring the home up to code compliance, you cut a deal with the land bank where you get it up to code compliance, you get the deed for a reduced rate, right? So that incents the private market to act on that property. And so we came up, the land bank has a data spec on that for what it would cost, for construction to bring it up to spec. We have an estimate of that number and we pushed that through the economy. We were very conservative in that number. We went like 65% of what the code, the estimated code compliance spec was. So we wanted to make sure we were extremely conservative in estimating that effect. But we know it happened. We know those dollars were spent because all those deed and escrow properties happened. They're all code compliant properties now. And so that total economic impact was estimated at 57 million in economic impact, a conservative estimate from the spend on those rehabilitations. And that created another 355 jobs in that process. So you have almost 2,500 jobs there that were created out of the dollars that bubbled out of the land bank's existence over the last 10 years for Cuyahoga County. And then you have, and so these are the sections of the report, like these are the sections of economic impact. So there's, how do you parse out 1.43 billion? There's one more major section, and that's effectively getting things back on the tax rolls and the catalytic investment that occurred through stories like we heard about the Amazon Center. So 13 million in direct sales. The direct sales likely would have happened anyway. That's a function of government. When things go to auction, it happens. But obviously the land bank is a better steward of that process. They vet the folks that those properties are going to. So, but there's still that 13 million in direct sales that we counted because that is action of the land bank. But now, tax revenue. There's $18.5 million of tax revenue directly back on the tax rolls from the land bank over the last decade as well. So at the county level. So we went in and we data mined every single property that the land bank touched and got back on the tax rolls and quantified how much actual revenue came back in. So we quantified that tax revenue that was affected. That was 18.5 million. And then with these catalytic investments, we had almost 303 million in catalytic investment, meaning clearing the lot, transferring the title. There's a whole list in the report of the different activities that the land bank did, similar to what you were talking about, and to basically position the property for that investment, right? So it's a pass through. So that there's about 303 million there, and we didn't. What we didn't do, that we went conservative on that as well. We didn't estimate all the construction jobs that came out of that. We didn't estimate all the long-term jobs that come in, like those 2,500 jobs. We didn't put that on there. So there's actually follow-on. There's much more impact than this 1.43 billion. But that's kind of where we cut it, and we said, you know, that catalytic investment, we got to give that proper estimation there. So those are the main components of the study. I think that's what I'm running through. A major insight that came out of the study beyond just kind of running through the numbers is that for the first time, so we've done this study a few times. The first time we did it was in 2013. We looked at the impact of demolition. We brought that to the U.S. Treasury, and that moved a lot of money for more demolition funds. It happened again in 2015, 2016. The state of Ohio also, we looked at the impact of hardest hit fund demolition statewide, and we used Cuyahoga data. So this happened a few times. We've built this model. And for the first time, after 10 years of doing this activity, we're actually seeing the needle move in the weakest neighborhoods in terms of property value impact. It's the first time we've ever seen it. It usually shows up insignificant when you do a demolition or a rehab in the weakest neighborhoods, because there's the insight or the interpretation was that there's too much blight, there is too much vacancy. So when you did a single demo or a single rehab, and values were low enough, you couldn't see a significant impact on property value because it was too saturated in the lower value properties, the blighted properties. Every one you took down, there was 10 more to replace it. But now, for the first time, we're actually seeing positive and significant property value effects in the weakest markets in Cleveland from these activities. So that's a very large takeaway of like the inertia and the outcome over a 10-year period. So that was a major finding of the study too. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Mr. Griswold. We now have time for some questions about the study itself, but for anything that the panelists may have presented to you. So there are mics stationed around the room. If you have some questions, please ask them now.
This is a shy crowd.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a hand in the back. Yes.
Since when did Jay need it?
And identify
We have a
yourself,
Train
please.
City Club mic holder over here. Jay Westbrook, worked with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy and former city councilman. I think this is embedded in all of the presentations, and I'm so everyone's impressed, almost speechless. I think that's why most people are not jumping up yet. But it is a remarkable story of stabilization and recovery. It's certainly reminiscent or thought, to me, it provokes thoughts of the MASH unit in a battlefield. Cuyahoga County certainly resembled, the housing market resembled such. And this could go to all panelists or any panelist, but as Ricardo pointed out, and the study shows that in the weaker market communities, where, as Nigel just said,
I didn't do that either.
The council president used to do that to me. It's, then I became the council president. I don't know. It's, anyway, I want to focus on, this could be kind of under the category of work still to do. The weaker market communities who are starting to show and register a bit of a market pulse. It's kind of like, you know, you have a cadaver there and there's a pulse, and you start to administer healing and help. That pulse, even in stockyards, is just around 50% of where housing value was when the crash occurred. In even weaker market communities, and most especially communities of color, that current quotes recovery number is maybe 30 to 40%. So when you focus on the existing homeowners, which are still the majority of these neighborhoods, vacant lots, income properties, abandoned properties are all sitting there, but people are mowing their yards, painting their house, paying their taxes, doing all the things citizens do. They are at a loss of 60% or more of the equity they had 10 years ago. And what compounds that is that as recovery would include repairing porches, fixing roofs, replacing garages, putting in a new driveway. Most people don't have the funds to do that sitting in their pocket or under their mattress, so they have to get some credit. And guess what? They go to get credit and they're told the housing values aren't sufficient enough to support the credit that they want. So there's a catch-20, they're caught in a catch-22. So what I'm asking is that as these weaker markets try to rebound, what are your thoughts about how to engage additional resources to not only do the job of the land bank and remove the blight, but also to aid in the recovery? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a loaded question, and it really is a challenge. But the good news is that one of the components of the county plan, out of their housing plan, was specific to being able to provide home repair loans, and especially home repair loans in weaker markets. So as you see the grid of doing both rehab, new construction, as well as home repair, all those components are part of what the county plan came forward on to say we need to be able to support the weaker markets, as well as the city of Cleveland stepping up and saying we want to be able also to have additional resources, and including things, simple things like the paint program, as well as the code partnership program, bringing it back, the program that you gave birth to years ago. So those are the smaller pieces, and of course demolition still is an important part of it, because we know we have to continue to do blight elimination. We're still sitting on some 4,000 vacant and abandoned properties that we need to deal with. But the county plan has a part of it, and the city is continuing to step up on that.
Jay, I would respond to highlight two areas that I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think it's always important to remember that every city has a weak market within it, an area that needs, and sometimes it isn't a geography, sometimes it's a housing type. And one of the things that we have identified in the city of Shaker Heights, for example, is that our condo market has not rebounded in the way that other parts of the market have. And this is a really good example of where you've got an odd housing type. These are largely apartment units which were converted into condos in the 70s, but have not maintained their vibrancy. Were really hard hit. In fact, they were my first exposure to the foreclosure crisis before we were talking about a foreclosure crisis. They were hit hard from as early as 2002 and 2003 because people stopped paying their HOA fees and so it impacted everybody around them. But it has unique challenges. You can't go in and just demo an individual condo unit. And so I think it's another good example of where, for example, the land bank is being a critical partner with us in helping to sit down with these HOAs and identify new strategies. So that's one area I wanted to bring up. And the second one was our commercial corridors in the first ring suburbs. You know, we talk about the housing crisis, but then we all know that there has been a long-term population loss and obsolescence of buildings in Cuyahoga County as well. And this really shows up in our commercial areas. And we all understood the importance of the demolition money for residential, given the scale of the problem, but it is certainly a need that's out there as well. And that what we learned, I think, as a community through these past 10 years is that doing it together, we are so much stronger in the advocacy, and we are going to continue to look to partners like the County Land Bank and Western Reserve Land Conservancy to help us on that advocacy side.
Next question.
I have a quick, just real quick. It's a short piece, but basically, because it's a funding question, and so that story, the story of that change, it's about translating that and delivering that to the correct space, right? So you have an evidence-based story there of the 10-year effect and it changing in the weakest markets, and so finding a way to translate that finding from this research into a deliverable way, into a space where the evidence-based story can have impact, that you're moving the needle over a long period of time and it's starting to happen. That's what I've seen as impactful. Grabbing those findings and then being able to deliver them in a way that tells a story is the way to move towards the next resources. That's my thought on that.
Great. Let's move to the next question. Yes, sir. Identify yourself.
Congratulations to the Land Bank. I'm Gus's brother, Lou, and I learned an awful lot today. It's amazing. So I have to come to these things to find out what my brother's doing. But I would really just like to understand, what is the challenge for the next 10 years? What do you see, what's the vision of the Land Bank for the next 10 years? And where's it going? And what's the major challenge that you have?
A question only a brother could ask.
You can tell me now or you can tell me later if you want.
Have you met his wife, Christine? She's in the next row over here, by the way.
You're not supposed to ask your brother tough questions. I didn't put him up to that, but our next, I think it was mentioned in some of the responses to Jay's question, and that is that we need to continue to leverage the money that we have to do more housing, re-stabilize markets, find ways to use our tools to provide access to capital in situations like where Ricardo was saying that the market is still soft. How can we catalyze comparable values in certain neighborhoods, as we have done, as we're starting to do a little bit when you hear weakest markets starting to be significantly affected. So I think, when something is good and is producing results, you want to continue to do that. And so we will do that, but the only difference now is to use our tools to endeavor into different things to catalyze those things, such as, investments, partnerships, some economic development activities that we didn't necessarily do because we were focused on demolition and rehab of homes. So all of those things are going to happen. If there are other external tools out there, like opportunity zones in certain areas of the city, we map those, we find properties that are distressed in those areas and try to find investors. So a lot of it is keeping our nose to the grind, and some of it is proactive, where we're actually trying to use the tools in a way to enlist continued development and catalyze money that's already out there.
And I would put an additional spin on this, less development, but more political. I think a 10-year challenge really is to keep the strength of the political engagement that's going on right now. We have an unprecedented partnership right now. When you look at what it takes to foreclose on a property and have the partners like we do at the county, between the prosecutor, the treasurer, the auditor, the clerk, the sheriff, all these components to foreclose on properties, it takes a tremendous amount of teamwork to do that. And Jim, who travels around all the state of Ohio, gets to see all of the different partners and what was created here. I kiddingly said they had their 10-year-old birthday of their grandchild. But I can tell you the terrible twos. When we switched from the commissioner system, when Jim was there with the treasurer and went to the executive system, it was a little rocky road on those terrible twos. But everybody worked together to make sure it continues. So the politics is a tremendous importance to it. I know Councilman Zach Reed was part of the early, when the land bank was invented, and it was important to see that all the council members worked together. So that's an important component of this, not just the development, but to be able to cross over aisles and have everybody work together. That's a big challenge for the next 10 years.
Mayor?
Good morning, Mayor Blackwell, Maple Heights. I have 2 comments and a quick question. I want to say that the land bank is also a coach and a mentor. Very early in office, I had Gus Frangos come out and walk me through how to leverage the land bank to really bring Maple Heights back to where it is right now, with all of those numbers that show that is indicative of what's happening in Maple Heights, a significant increase in our median home value. And Nigel, thank you for what you guys did very early on as a result of the 5 cities getting together and getting the grant from the Cleveland Foundation to really take a strong look and assess what our property is. Maple Heights is densely populated with almost 10,000 housing units. I don't have huge factories. I have real estate, and so I'm able to leverage that. And so to Mayor David Smith, thank you for building Amazon, because I am selling a ton of homes because they're looking for a place to live. And they can bike there, they can walk there, because we're about 5 miles apart. So what the economic impact is also the quality of life, and really just your success in North Randall made going into a city that also is still in fiscal emergency. But I'm able to come out of it, and it's looking very optimistically, because I'm able to sell so many homes. Last year alone, and my housing manager is here, and a council person from District 2, we've also been able to partner with Slavic Village to sell some homes. We're using our couple models to move our real estate. My biggest asset is real estate, and so it's just really knowing how to leverage that, and so many people in this room have been a part of that success. But I want to tell you, out of those 492 homes sold last year, 201 went to LLC, so we do have some investors, but the other half went to owner-occupied homes at market, arm's length transaction, at market value. So thank you. That development hits in ways you guys don't know. You did the hard work, and we are reaping the benefits, and people are choosing homes and able to buy them and maintain them. And we're addressing our blight because of so many people here at the table. The last question I'll say very quickly, someone asked me to ask it, and also is an issue for myself being on the executive board of the First Service Consortium, is you have these homes, and Ricardo, you said what the median price is. Banks aren't making loans, and Sally Martin's right here to my right. We're working on this in the First Service Consortium, and certainly in many cities like Maple Heights, working to get banks to realize that that's still a good loan, even though it's not $100,000 on a home, and I realize it takes just as much personnel to process a low loan. But these are ways to build, just stabilize families, homelessness, and it affects our school system with the transit, get people situated in a quality of life, and maybe mom can quit one of the 3 jobs she's working for those single-family homes. But also, it creates generational wealth, which are all significant to communities of color. So I hope that at some point we can get together and as a group of people that are all invested in our communities and we care about the quality of life in this area to get banks to make loans for homes that are less than $50,000. Thank you.
Oh, this is trouble now.
My name is Christy Frangos. I'm Gus's
my
wife.
gosh.
So I'm going to give you a little personal insight on Gus. First of all, it is such a joy and a pleasure to connect faces to the stories that I hear. And Louie, if you want to know what's going on, come home. Gus's heart is for Cleveland. And I think the beautiful thing is with his staff, the brick and mortar is the human lives. And whereas Nigel, I so much appreciate the work that you did. And if you're a numbers person, you've got to be going bananas with all of that and the data. And so thank you for that. But more than the economic impact, the impact is the human life impact. And I know that Gus's staff wakes up every morning and they breathe this. It's about changing lives. It's about giving hope. And that's what the Cuyahoga Land Bank has done. It's breathed hope into a very cold state. So we're not snowbirds. We don't go down south. We stay here. So we know the people who stay here have got a strong soul, and we endure. And I thank you, honey, for all that you've done, and I stand by your side. It's been a tough 10 years, but the rewards are sweet because we hear these incredible stories. I've met these beautiful people here who make an impact on the human lives, and that's the difference that you are. So thank you all for
thank
your
you.
support and all
I
that
could
you
not
do.
have done anything without my beautiful wife. And I promise you, I didn't tell her to say that.
Okay, we can all go home now.
Boy, following her, I feel so crass to talk about money, but no, I am, Christie. In about 3 hours, House Bill 252 is going to pass out of a subcommittee in the Ohio House. It sets aside $50 million a year for 2 years, $100 million. It's for demolition, but it's going to allow the money to be used not only for residential, but commercial and industrial. Now, and one of the, and you talked about we're grandkids, Tony, I've got 54 other grandchildren. In fact, while I'm sitting here, I just got called from the land bank in Athens County, a new land bank, great guy down there, Chris Schmiel. But here's the situation. Money will only allow no more, and this is what you deal with in Columbus, no more than 20% can go to any one county. So if it's $100 million that limits us to $20 million, it's also going to require a match. And I guess I'm going to say this, for us, I think one of our challenges is that we have received great help from our federal partners. They're here today. We received money from the Attorney General settlement, as you know, the robo-signing settlement back in 2012. The state to this point, and I don't count that settlement as a state grant or state funds, we've received no money from the state of Ohio. You know, we certainly got the power through the state. We appreciate their help. But all the funds that have been raised thus far, $50 million from Cuyahoga County, $122 million total from that robo-signing settlement, including the match, and about $260 or $70 million from the hardest hit funds. Nothing from the state of Ohio. So we're going to pass out of the House Finance Committee tomorrow, and I'm told that the Speaker Householder says we'll be out of the House by the weekend, but we're not going to be in the budget, which is passing on Saturday or Sunday. So our next fight is to engage everybody here and tell you that we're going to go to the Senate. We need to work with you in making sure that we get this thing passed through the Senate, and we have to continue to look for dollars to make land banks work, because the one thing I've learned around the state was the mayor of Youngstown, who we were talking about why he needed a land bank in Mahoning County, said to me, a land bank with no money for demolition, he said, it was like a new car with no gas. It was nice to look at, but it didn't take him anywhere. We have to continue to advocate for resources at the state level, and as Senator Portman's office knows and Brown's office knows, there are unspent hardest hit fund dollars being returned to the hardest hit fund program soon, sometime in 2019. We'd like to claw some of those dollars back and bring them to a state that I know will spend them, and that state is Ohio. We'd like to get at least an extra year or two. So we're always looking for more dough, and I can't tell you how gratifying this is to hear this story. I've heard it, but having it presented all at once is one of the most rewarding things in my life. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. You know, as Dean, every year I tell our incoming students, your job is to learn enough to change the world for the better.
Amen.
But I also know that that's a quite difficult thing to do. So when you hear about an organization and an individual who's leading an organization that is changing the world for the better, it's just very gratifying. So I just want to say before I close, thank you, Gus Francos, for changing the world for the better. I want to thank your staff. You can applaud. I want to thank you and your staff for building a strong institution that is serving this community well. I want to thank our panelists for their great presentations. I want to commend Mr. Nigel Griswold for an important study. I want to close by saying the college stands ready to be of assistance and partnership in the efforts of the bank going forward. We're truly privileged that you held it in our building. And I also want to say that I think there are so many, number of our graduates on your staff. Thank you for hiring. We are closed, and thanks again for coming out. You want to?